Welcome to the Productivity Show, a podcast where we believe that you can get the important things done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. My name is Tan, and I'm the founder and CEO of Agent Efficiency, where we help people become more productive at work and in life. And normally, I'm joined by my co-host, Brooks Duncan, but today I replaced him with a very special guest and good friend of mine, Matt Kepnes, also known as Nomadic Matt. He is a travel writer and a New York Times bestselling author of the book, How to Travel the World on $50 a Day, Travel Cheaper, Longer, and Smarter. And in 2008, Matt started nomadicmatt.com to document his travel stories and share his travel hacks. The website offers practical travel tips from how to score cheap flights and accommodations with frequent flyer miles and credit card points to how to frugally travel the world by finding cheap local eats and free activities. And also, Matt has traveled to over more than 100 countries and knows a thing or two about working remote and being productive on the road. So I'm really excited to have him here today. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, so we're going to be talking about working remote and the travel hacking and all that good stuff. But before we start off the podcast, we always like to ask our guests some of their favorite resources on their topic. So would you mind maybe sharing 3 of them on the podcast here?
Yeah, sure. I really like Nomad List, which it's called Nomad List. And it just has a great, it's a website, lots of great information on where to work remote, visa rules, information on co-working spaces, internet speeds, all that kind of jazz. I think a good book on remote work and the Bible of this is 4-Hour Work Week. A lot of those things in that book, because it came out 15 years ago, if not more by now. Some of the resources are a little dated, but the theory and the concept of remote work and being a digital nomad are still relevant today. And a third resource, picking my brain here, what's it called? Dynamite Circle is really nice. It's an online organization of entrepreneurs and remote workers, digital nomads. The founder, Dan Andrews, actually based in Austin, and you can meet a lot of like-minded people there.
So Matt, when people come to your website, they know you about travel and all the things you've done over the years when it comes to travel hacking and helping people be more productive working on the road. But what a lot of people might not know is that you have this crazy sushi obsession. Like the number of people that I know who go to omakase spots in a year, there's very few people that I can count on one hand that go to like more than 2 in a year, let alone 6 or even 10. And you've been to omakase spots all over the world.
Yeah, I think we hit 5 or 6 last year just together.
Yeah, so where does this sushi obsession come from?
I was growing up, there was this place, Arigato, in my town. It was run by this little Japanese lady. My parents used to get sushi all the time. And back then it was like California roll. I think to this day she still made the best California roll. There's just something about her seaweed that I really loved. And then she migrated to a restaurant in the airport, and then we went to this place called Saki up near Boston where I'm from. And it just kind of grown since then. I started with tuna rolls and, salmon rolls, and maybe I'd get crazy with like a spicy roll. And then over the years, it just blossomed into a full-on obsession. Probably in my early 20s, I was like, okay, this is my favorite food. They always ask, what would be your last meal be? And it would just be sushi. Yeah, I could eat sushi every day for every meal, and I wouldn't tire of it. I'd probably get crazy sick from all the raw fish, but I could do it.
Have you gone to Japan yet? And then also, do you have any interesting stories from Japan, like eating sushi there or going to a particular restaurant, or were you mind blown being there, eating sushi, or is it even better over there compared to what we have in the States?
The worst sushi you'll get in Japan is better than anything you'll get in America. Okay, maybe not anything you get in America, but the worst sushi there is, we would get it as omakase here and be like, this was so good. I've been to Japan 4 times. I'm going back a 5th this year. Actually, I have 2 really fun sushi experiences. First, I went to the sushi place in Osaka. It took me a really long time to find. It was in this back alley. And it was recommended by Anthony Bourdain. And I actually thought it was only okay. It was really good, but I wasn't mind blown by it. Me and him actually got into a little Twitter back and forth about it. But what was really fun about this place was that it was run by this old couple. It was like this little tiny like sushi bar, and they didn't speak a lick of English. And so when I walked in as the foreigner, like their look was like, uh-oh. Because you can tell they didn't know how to talk to me. But luckily, because of all the sushi I eat, I know the Japanese names for fish. So I could order everything I wanted in Japanese because I know the name for the fish. And I had this, like, they started pointing at stuff, and I was like, hamachi, toro, unagi. And the look of relief on their face was just very memorable. They were like, woo, okay. And we didn't say anything. And I was like, oishi, which is delicious in Japanese. And that's basically the extent of what we said. And then at the end, I was like, check. The second experience I had, I was on a tour, and I was in Kanazawa. I want to say I was in Kanazawa, which is on the west coast of Japan. And I went for sushi. I went to this like sushi train, the conveyor belt. So I'm sitting there by myself eating, and it fills up, and this Japanese business guy sits next to me. And we start talking, and so he just says, try this, try that. He's try Naruto, which is like this fermented bean. Not good. But we ended up chatting for a while and drinking some sake, and he like ends up just buying my meal for me because he was like, welcome to Japan, so great to see you. And I was like, wow, that was a really fun experience. Like the guy told me about a bunch of fish and was just curious, and I asked him about life in Kanazawa, and yeah, it was just a fun little time.
So before you became a world-renowned travel writer, tell me a little bit about what you were like in high school and how you became this travel writer over time.
Oh, what was I like in high school? Complete nerd. I mean, like, the nerdiest of nerds. On the nerd totem pole, I was the bottom. So you can tell I was like the lowest. I used to wear Pinky and the Brain t-shirts. I had a bowl cut. Those like the mushroom bowl cuts from the 90s. I grew up in the 90s. Yeah, I collected comics. I played Magic. I read a lot. Very studious. How I got into travel. I didn't grow up traveling. My parents, the craziest we got was like we went on a cruise once. Other than that, there was like nothing in my life that you would envision. Oh, that guy's going to be a writer and he's going to be a traveler. No, you'd be like, that guy's going to go corporate middle manager. But in my early 20s, I took a trip to Costa Rica. I was working in healthcare at the time, and they were like, you have 2 weeks vacation. If you don't use it, you lose it. And I was like, well, I'm an adult now. I got a job. I have my own apartment. I put money into a 401k. I got to take my 2 weeks vacation. And so I went to Costa Rica on a tour, and it was there that I really fell in love with travel, where I was like, wow, now I get why people look forward to those 2 weeks out of the year. Because this is like the one time anything is possible. You can wake up and do whatever you wanted. There were no emails. There weren't really that many emails back then. But there was no meetings. There's no podcasts to record. There was nothing to do. You were just free on your 2 weeks vacation. And I really liked that. And so I came home and I immediately started planning another trip. And it was there on my next trip to Thailand that I met a bunch of backpackers who I was like, I want to be like them. Here they had found this, it's like with this like seemingly like secret code. Oh, we can travel the world for a year and we have all this, we found a way to make our money last and all that stuff. And I was like, I went in on that lifestyle. And so I came back and I quit my job. And a year later, I went traveling with the intention of going for 18 months. And I just never stopped.
And how much money did you have saved up to be able to make that decision then to go, hey, you know what, I'm going to quit my job? Because most people would be scared to quit their job and then go travel, especially if they don't know how they're going to make income.
I saved $30,000. I left when I was 25, so between 22 and 25, I saved 30 grand. And that was a lot of just investing. When it was time to go, I cashed out my 401k. I took the tax penalty and was like, time to go. And I worked a lot of extra hours. I worked at a hospital and they always had shift work. So on top of my 9 to 5, I would just work extra hours. So some weeks I would work 60 hours a week. It was all about just getting as much money as I can. I wanted to spend 20 on the trip and come back with 10 so I could have some runway while I lived at my parents' to look for a job. I ended up coming back with nothing, but I also ended up spending an extra 6 months overseas. And yeah, that's when I started my blog in 2008. I'm kind of glad I came home broke, because I think if I didn't have to find a job, and I found a job doing temp work, but it was a really crappy job and I really didn't like it, but I needed the money. And I think if I had the ability to wait for the right job, I wouldn't have taken that job, and then I wouldn't have started my blog. And then you and I would never have met.
Crazy decisions you've made over the years, but it all worked out. I'm glad it all worked out, because we have a lot of great times together here in Austin, Texas, but also as someone who travels a lot myself, but also you, it's hard to sometimes figure out schedules when we can actually be together. And since you've traveled all over the world and been to like over 100 countries, what are your tips for people who want to be productive while they're traveling? If you're either working remote or they have their own business, they're self-employed, what are some tenets that you have when it comes to being productive while traveling?
I think my best advice is to don't do it, in the sense that like you cannot work and travel at the same time. And one will always suffer. If you want to go work from Paris, spend time in Paris living there, whether you're living there for a week or 1 month. Don't be like, oh, I'm going to go to Paris for a week and I'm going to like work in the mornings and sightsee in the afternoons. Because you're going to want to do more and you're going to be like, oh, I can't believe I'm working. I want to be out. And then when you're out, all your work is coming in and you haven't like really checked out for the day. You're basically like on this extended mental break, right? So you're just stressed about it. So one always suffers. You have to have days. Like you have to be like, this is a work day and this is a travel day. So you can only do one thing at one time, you know? And so if you're trying to work and travel at the same time, you're basically trying to divide your attention. You're multitasking. But it's never meant, your brain isn't meant to multitask, right? So I would say that if you want to go, oh, I want to work remote or I want to be a digital nomad, when you have work, that's it. That's what you do. And if that means you have to spend 10 days in Paris or 6 days in Paris, or you can't go to a big city, you got to go to a smaller destination with fewer things to do, so be it. Because if you try to like juggle both, you're going to burn out, and you're going to burn out really quickly. And no matter how often I think, oh, I got this now, I burn out. Oh, I'm a pro. I've been doing this for 15 years. Nope, I will still burn out.
So what you're saying is if you are planning to work remote, dedicate days to working and not giving into the sightseeing and the attractions that the destination might have to offer. But then you can still have days while you are at the location to say, hey, my work days are over. Let's just say Monday through Friday, for example, but then still spend Saturday and Sunday at the location. Is that fair? Or are you saying go on a trip just to do the trip itself and enjoy it and don't work at all?
I guess it depends how long you have, right? So I don't let my team work remote. I let my team work remote, but I don't let them work when they travel. So if somebody on my team is like, hey, I'm going to Brazil and I'm going there to explore, I'm like, great, you're on vacation. Make sure your work is done, because I don't want to be chasing you down while you're like, sorry, I have this like excursion I have to do. When you're out of the office, you're out of the office. But if they're like, hey, I'm going to Brazil for a month, great. Now they're working from Brazil and they'll just let us know when the days are on and the days are off. So if you're like, I'm going to Brazil for a week, Rio for a week, decide if you're going to work remote. Do you just want to work from Brazil? Because you're going to have to basically decide one day is solely for work and one day is solely for travel. Don't try to split your days. It's not going to work. So whether it's 3 days of work, 4 days of travel, however you want to split that, just one day, one thing.
It almost sounds like a waste of money if you go all the way to Rio for 1 week and you spend 5 days working there.
Yeah, exactly. Just take vacation. But if you can work remote, then you can work anywhere, right? So just go for a month, because then you're gonna get weekends to explore. Then you have a whole week to like work, but also explore the rhythm of the city, right? Go find a new coffee shop, go to breakfast, find a co-working space. At night, you get to go to an event. There's not so much pressure to be like, oh, I have this long list of sites I need to see, so I'm just going to be stressed all week.
I know life can be imperfect, and sometimes we have to do stuff while we're traveling or while we're on the road, or sometimes we have to take trips where we know that we might have to work while we're also have to do leisure things at the same time. So I'm curious then, what does your setup look like? Or do you have a specific workflow or particular apps or tools that you use while you're getting stuff done on the road, or is it like the same thing?
Same thing at home. I have a laptop and we communicate via Slack. So nothing really special. At home, I have a ring light that I use for video, but I don't really travel with a lot of gear. I still abide by I am either working or I'm traveling day, like it's either work. But even if it's a travel day, then I will like usually wake up, because I wake up pretty early. So I'll like work till about 10. Nothing's really open before 10 anyways, right? So then around 10, I'll just go out and I'll usually come back around 4 or 5. And then before I go out for dinner, I'll check my Slack and my email. And then I'll go back out. But like, I don't do any like heavy lifting. Like, I'm not trying to approve a new project or edit something that's going to take 2 or 3 hours. That comes on a travel day or a work day.
So while you're in Austin then, are you very structured in that sense of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday kind of thing? And maybe specific days have certain things going on, or is it pretty free flow, or how do you structure your week?
Don't forget Saturday and Sunday where I work too. I tend to just basically hibernate a lot when I'm home. Obviously, we go to dinner all the time. But a typical day, I work till lunch. I have lunch. I work a couple hours more. I go to the gym. I read a book. And then I'll usually go out for dinner, because I haven't talked to anybody all day. That's pretty much all I do. Because when I'm traveling, I like to travel. So I like play catch up when I'm at home, where I like do all the big projects. Next week, we're recording this at the end of January 2023, and next week I'm going to New York, and I have a bunch of things to do in New York. My calendar is just filled with work and stuff, so like I'm not really going to get a lot of work done. So I'm just trying to get it all done now, so I'm not stressed about it in New York. And then when I come back, I'll have to play catch up. So like normally here, I just kind of work and hang out with friends. It's not very glamorous.
Yeah, we have to do a lot of non-glamorous things to sometimes be able to do the things that people might see might be glamorous. And I always talk about how, honestly, most of my days, 90% of it is pretty boring. I'm behind a computer, I'm on Zoom, I'm doing a lot of writing, I'm doing a lot of thinking, and maybe the 10% that people see is exciting. But 90% of the time, I'm literally working out, eating the same food, and sitting behind a computer.
Yeah, like my Instagram is like super, super dead when I'm home for an extended period of time, because I'm not doing anything. And I always feel weird because it's a travel brand, so to speak. Here's me at the grocery store, and here's me at like the gym for the 8th time. People do want to know what I do, but it's like, I don't really do anything. And here's my dinner. I'm just not that kind of person. When I'm on the road, it's always lots of that stuff. I like to work less. The bigger your company is, the more you end up working.
Switching gears a little, when you go to a new destination, a country or city you haven't been to yet, what is your research process like in terms of what you will do, will not do? Are there particular people you would talk to or resources you always go to for your research? What is your research process like when you're going to a new destination?
Yeah, if I'm going to a completely new place, I will usually read a few blogs online. If I'm staying there for a while, let's say I'm going to a new country for a month or a couple of weeks, I'll usually buy a guidebook. But other than that, I don't do a lot of like pre-research. I'll look at, okay, what are the big things to do there? And then I'll figure that out. And I'll look for like food tours or walking tours. I love both of those. I think those are a great way to learn about a place. But then when I'll land, I'll walk into the city's tourism board, which I think is a totally underrated resource. Most people skip the local tourism office, but that's staffed by people who literally whose literally only job it is to help you have a good time in that destination. And they are also local, so you can just go in and be like, hey, when you get off work, where do you go for great sushi? Where do you go for vegetables? And they're gonna be like, oh, I go to this market or I go to that Japanese restaurant. And so that way, rather than saying, hey, I'm visiting, what should I do? Because they're gonna tell you all the touristy stuff. You say, hey, what do you do? And then you get all the local stuff. And I think that's a really underutilized resource by most travelers. Do you go into the local tourism office?
No, I don't. I just tell my executive assistant, I'm going here for the first time. Here's a checklist of all the things that I like to do. And then she just helps me put it together. To give you an example, I have a checklist, and one of the things are check out if this particular city has a top 100 cocktail bar in the world. Because I always find cocktail bars fascinating places to go to, whether it's a speakeasy or anything unique like that. But also, I'm a big foodie, as people know, so I'm always looking for a Michelin star restaurant if it's there, and if there is, what do we have to do to get in, right? So I always center it around food and drinks personally, and then all the activities and touristy stuff is almost like a last resort, because oftentimes I find them underwhelming unless it's like a seventh wonder of the world or something like that. But for the most part, most things kind of are the same after a while.
Yeah, I usually look at walking tours, and I'll be like, I've traveled enough where I have a general knowledge of most places in the world, right? I may not know a lot about it, but if I was going to go to, say, okay, what's the place? I haven't been to Peru, right? So if I was going to Peru for the first time, I know enough about Peru to know that Lima has an up-and-coming food scene. So I'd go on a food tour, or I'd take a history tour, or I'd be speaking of Japan, right? Tokyo. There's a lot of kind of weird music and art stuff in Tokyo, just very eclectic mix of styles, clubs and bars. So I try to Google offbeat bar tour, right? Or something that is like that. Because that's one of my favorite things to do, is just find the weird stuff.
So what are some weird stuff you've done? Maybe some highlights.
I guess how do you find weird stuff?
Let's just name a few cities, and then I'll give you some prompts, okay? Because I know some of your favorite cities. So Paris is one of your favorite cities. Everyone thinks Eiffel Tower, romantic dinner. What is an offbeat thing to do in Paris?
Okay, an offbeat thing to do. I like the term offbeat better because weird is it's culturally charged in a way, not negative in some way, but it's, oh, look at the weird food they eat. But that's just food to them, right? Because they would say the same thing about us. Those Americans and their weird food. But there's a really good 1920s tour in Paris. It's a walking tour, and it takes you through all the famous 1920s literature, where Hemingway ate, and all the jazz age stuff, which I really like. In terms of more offbeat stuff, just living there and stuff. If you go up to Belleville or the 18, places outside the center, you get way more local spots. There's one place called La Recycleria, and it's an old train station converted into a cafe, and it's right over the train tracks now. And the tracks are shut down, so during the summertime, they put tables on the tracks so you can hang out outside, and it's really cool, right? But hardly anybody goes there. And so I'll also, in terms of, what's there to do in a place, I'll look for local food or travel bloggers or Instagram accounts, right? Because they're going to be here in Austin, we have 512 Bites or A Taste of Cocoa. And so all these places to eat and drink, every city has their own version of that. So find that person and you just look at their feed and you're going to find out all the new restaurant openings, all the new bar openings, cool things to do. Because those feeds are meant for locals more than they are meant for tourists. It's just tourists happen to read that.
Yeah, I really like that idea of think who, not how. It's the idea that if you have a challenge or a problem, don't think about how you're going to solve this. Think about who already has the answer to this. And if you're looking into going to a new city, the local influencers, if you may call them, already have everything figured out. So why do your own research when you can just figure out who they are and look at what they've published? And it probably makes a lot of sense for, like you said, for the locals, which is oftentimes the experience most people want anyway.
Yeah, just Googling like top food blogger, Austin or Tokyo, or wherever, it's going to bring up some article about like who to follow in such and such a place. And then you're like, okay, great. Now I have their Instagram accounts and I'll go there.
Yeah, I think one day we should make that list, but I don't think we post enough about food.
Yeah, I think you do. Me, not so much. Yeah, I may like a lot of omakasas, but I have a reputation to keep as a budget traveler.
So when it comes to traveling solo, which is something you've done hundreds of times in your life, tell me a little bit about all the things you've learned from just traveling solo and maybe some wisdom you would like to give to people about the benefits of traveling solo.
Solo travel really allows you to find yourself. I don't mean that in some cheesy, like spiritual in a sense, but like when you're on your own, you only have yourself to count on. And so you must go make friends. You must figure out how to get from point A to point B. You must decide where you're going to eat. You have to decide everything. It's a lot of work. If you think about if you've ever traveled in a group or with a friend, he is probably doing more of the legwork, right? And then there are people who are coasting. And if you're traveling with a group of people and you're like, I just don't want to put in any effort, somebody in the group is going to pick up that slack. But if you're traveling by yourself, you can't do that. You have to decide all this stuff. So it really makes you a lot more confident in your ability to make decisions. It gives you a lot more trial and error to define what do you like, what don't you like. It forces you out of your comfort zone, and you don't have a choice. Unless you want to go spend 3 weeks never talking to somebody, you have to start striking up a conversation. And so it just makes you more confident in your own skin, and it just allows you more chances to break out of your comfort zone and find new things about yourself and refine also who you are and what you like or dislike. If you just take trying to get from point A to point B, right? We go on autopilot for so much. And we get in our car, we drive to work. Like we could do that, not blindfolded, but we've done it so much. Most of our brain just like daydreams, and then we find ourselves at work. It becomes this sort of automatic thing. But if you're trying to get the train in India, it's very active. Like you have to be thinking about where am I, what am I doing? And so suddenly you're like, oh, I can do this. If I can do this, I can do, if I'm able, now I went through this new process. So if this situation happens again, I know what to look for. And I think it's if you get out of your comfort zone, you travel solo for a while, you then get better at reading people, like, because you've seen more facial expressions, you put yourself in more situations, so you can tell the people's intentions more. You get more confident just asking for what you want or asking for help because, like, you had to do it. There's no friend to be like, well, you booked the train tickets. You can't be scared.
For somebody who's introverted, like myself, how do you meet people on your trips, or what advice would you give them to make it really easy for them to meet people and start conversations?
I'm super introverted myself, especially more so when I'm home. We go out and hang out all the time. Like at a party, I would rather, if there's one friend, I'm going to probably hang out with just my one. Unless that person introduces me, I'm not like super great. At least I don't think I am at meeting new people. But when I'm on the road, it's just, I got this. You just kind of have to learn because you're like, I think it's just, you have less social anxiety because who cares? You're never going to see that person again. Or you're likely not. Maybe you have the best of times and you do stay in touch. But I find that bar crawls, food tours, walking tours in hostels, and even if you don't want to stay at a hostel bars are just a really great way to meet other people. Meetup.com. So if you were to have some sort of interest, so let's say jazz music, Meetup.com probably has a local jazz club. So you can go there and you can go and someone probably speaks your language and you at least have something you can talk about. Hey, I'm visiting from Austin. I love jazz. I just want to talk jazz. And so you don't really have to talk about anything else but jazz. And then that gets you out of your shell. That's the crutch. And then suddenly you're not talking about jazz. You're like, they're asking you where you're from. You're asking them about their life here. And suddenly you're talking to 3 or 4 people. And then you're going out. It's the whole thing.
Before we wrap it up here, Matt, tell me about your latest story of going to LA or going to Vegas and how you end up coming back in Austin. And what are some things you've done in the last few weeks since I've seen you?
I went to Vegas for work. And here's a good example. I was at the blackjack table. And nothing brings people together like winning money or losing money. And so we're just all having a great time, supporting each other's wins and commiserating it. When the dealer, he always seemed to get 21. You start talking to people, and now a couple of those people, we follow each other online. And it was never like, oh, can't talk. And these are strangers. Like, I think another good way to meet people is like a shared group activity. So if you're really into, say, pickleball, go find pickleball somewhere, or basketball. I have some friends that play volleyball, and they always find like the volleyball league, and that's one way they meet people. And that was like just a great experience where you get to meet people, and we had fun, even though we were losing money. It was more about just the atmosphere. It was like the quintessential Vegas commercial where people are like gambling and just having a great time, and that was us. So that was a cool memory from the last couple of weeks.
Awesome. Matt, I really enjoyed this, and I know you and I can always talk for hours and hours about stuff, but like all good things, I have to come to an end. If people want to find out more about you, your books, your website, where should they go?
Yeah, so they can find me at nomadicmatt.com, and I'm on any social media platform at Nomadic Matt. And then they can find my books at any bookstore or Amazon. There's 2, How to Travel the World on $50 a Day, and the second one, which is 10 Years a Nomad. First one is like a planning book, like what to do, how to save money, and the second one is a memoir on my 10 years backpacking the world.
Awesome. Thank you, Matt, for being on the show today. We'll have links to everything that we talked about in the show notes. I really appreciate you being here, and thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.